A week is a very long time in politics. Last Friday, Zelensky was sparring with Trump in the White House. This Friday, he's asking for peace talks and heading to Saudi Arabia to meet American officials. What made him climb down? America's military aid cut and Russia's stepped up bombing. We'll tell you how this is shaping up. Meanwhile, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has a radical idea. Give Ukraine NATO security without NATO membership. That's what she's proposed. Will it fly? As Europe figures out the path ahead, is a clash brewing between France and the UK. What's with Trump's tariffs? Are they on or off? The uncertainty and the constant U-turns have spooked markets. Experts fear a recession in America. Musk is not in charge of layoffs in your teams. That is Donald Trump's message to his cabinet members. We decode it for you. Also looking at Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri's visit to Moscow, how Kashmir has fared economically since Article 370 was removed. Growth has increased, unemployment has decreased. Is Japan the next American ally on notice? Why the world still needs feminism? And why the US president says the stranded NASA astronauts may be in love. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. US President Trump says he has written to Iran asking it to open talks on preventing the development of nuclear weapons. Trump has warned that if Tehran refuses, it could face military action. Curbs were imposed on Iran's nuclear program in a landmark 2015 deal, but in 2018, Trump withdrew the US from that agreement. Syrian forces clash with Bashar al-Assad's loyalists. At least 70 people killed after the violence. Syria's new government launches a sweeping security operation and reportedly executes nearly 70 people, 70. This is the worst violence in Syria since the rebels toppled Assad in December last year. Bangladesh's interim leader Mohammed to visit China later this month. He is likely to hold a bilateral meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This will be Yunus's first visit to China since he took charge of Bangladesh last August, after Sheikh Hasina was ousted. Since the political changeover, Beijing has sought to deepen ties with Dhaka. 4 boats carrying migrants sink off Djibouti and Yemen. At least 1 person has been killed and more than 180 are missing. Most of these migrants are from Ethiopia. The sinkings took place along one of the world's most dangerous migrant routes. Last year, more than 500 people died along this route. As of today, wolves have become less protected in most of Europe. This as new conservation regulations come into force. The move allows hunting to resume. The UK, the Czech Republic and Monaco were the only countries to oppose this decision.
Ukraine wants to make a deal because I don't think they have a choice. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible. We've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Russia is on the offensive. This week, the US withdrew significant military support to Ukraine. First, they pulled back military aid, then they stopped intelligence sharing. Now, this significantly weakens Ukrainian forces, and the Russians are not wasting any time. They have stepped up attacks on Ukraine. Last night, Ukraine came under heavy fire, with Russian missiles raining on them. The Russians targeted Ukraine's critical infrastructure like the energy and gas facilities. The extent of the damage is not clear, but the scale should worry Kyiv, because Moscow has been at it. They've been ramping up attacks for days now. The Russians want to secure gains on the battlefield and, if possible, capture more territory. They want to weaken Ukraine before they sign a peace deal, and the US is blaming Ukraine for this state of affairs. It says Kyiv brought it upon itself.
Yeah, but this is one of those, very candidly, they brought it on themselves, the Ukrainians. The best way I can describe it is sort of like hitting a mule with a 2x4 across the nose. You got their attention. And it is significant, obviously, because of the support that we give. okay? But it's one way to get your attention to do it. But it's a pause. It's not an end. And it's then up to them to do it.
For Zelensky, the writing is on the wall. In fact, it has been for a while, but I guess he has no choice but to see it now. He is not winning this war. He cannot withstand Russia on the battlefield without American military aid. Now that aid has been cut. So for how long can Ukrainian forces last in this fight? Best case scenario, 6 months. Worst case, 4 months. And these are just estimates. Either way, time is running out for Ukraine, so Zelensky is now keen to negotiate. A meeting is being set up in Saudi Arabia, where officials from the US and Ukraine will meet next week.
Well, President Zelensky sent a letter to the president. I think the president thought that it was a really good, positive first step. And from that, we're now in discussions to coordinate a meeting with the Ukrainians in Riyadh or even potentially Jeddah. So the city's moving around a little bit, but it will be Saudi Arabia. And I think the idea is to get down a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well.
Zelensky, too, will travel to Saudi Arabia next week. He is expected to meet Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince. It is not clear if MBS will attend the talks, but this meeting is definitely a step forward. Last month, the Russians attended a similar conference. They met officials from the US in Riyadh, and now it is Ukraine's turn. The US wants to hear them out, with the Saudis acting as mediators again. So what does the US hope to achieve with this? Two things. First, narrow down a framework for a peace deal, and second, discuss the possibility of a ceasefire. That's what they're aiming at, the Americans. And what is Zelensky's wish list? He says the US should put pressure on the Russians and get them to agree to his demands. And here is the list of his demands. Stop attacks on critical infrastructure like energy and power facilities, stop missile attacks, stop dropping bombs and long-range drones, and stop military operations in the Black Sea. Basically, Zelensky wants Russia to stop attacking Ukraine before signing a peace deal. That is his ask. Unfortunately for him, he is in no position to dictate terms. He is at the mercy of the Americans. Trump may or may not pay heed to his demands, especially after their very public spat last week. Although we know that Zelensky has climbed down since, Trump says the Ukrainian president has apologized. He is also offering to sign the minerals deal because he has no choice. Those are Trump's words.
And when Zelensky inevitably comes back to the White House, what do you expect from him? And do you think you'll see him in a necktie?
Well, I think what's going to happen is Ukraine wants to make a deal because I don't think they have a choice. I also think that Russia wants to make a deal because in a different way that only I know, they have no choice either.
Trump's team is taking a softer approach now. They say Zelensky is engaging in good faith. And what about the Russians? Will they listen to Ukraine's demands? Unlikely, because Putin has made it clear that he wants a peace agreement on his terms.
We must choose for ourselves a peace option that will suit us and that will ensure peace for our country in the long-term historical perspective. We do not need anything that belongs to others, but we will not give up what is ours.
Since taking office, Trump has made multiple offers to Russia, even pulled military support to Ukraine to force them to the talking table. But Russia has not reciprocated to Trump's overtures. Putin has refused to make any commitments. There is no promise to accept a ceasefire or a peace deal brokered by Donald Trump. In fact, the Kremlin does not even recognize Volodymyr Zelensky as a legitimate leader. Listen to this.
The question is who to negotiate with. As of now, the Ukrainian president is still legally prohibited from negotiating with the Russian side. Therefore, the overall approach is positive, but the nuances have not changed yet.
Now, this has always been Russia's stance. If they don't recognize Zelensky, will they sign a deal with him? As of now, the Russians want to talk only to the US. And they've made sweeping demands, like the demilitarization of Ukraine and NATO's withdrawal from Eastern Europe. Will Trump give this to Putin? Will Europe agree to this? And where does this leave Zelensky? On the back foot and far from a peace deal. Everyone seems to have a plan for Ukraine. Keir Starmer has a plan, Emmanuel Macron has one, and so does Donald Trump. So Italy does not want to be left behind. Their Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, proposed a plan yesterday. A NATO security cover for Ukraine. Not membership, only security cover. Listen to this.
It's something different from NATO membership, but it would extend the same protection that NATO countries have to Ukraine. I believe that would be a stable, lasting, and effective security guarantee, more so than some of the proposals I'm seeing.
It's an interesting proposal, but what does it mean? NATO has something called Article 5. It's a mutual defense clause, Article 5. If one NATO member is attacked, all of them will respond together. That's what Article 5 says. Say, Russia launches a missile at Germany. Then all of NATO will hit back. Now, Giorgia Meloni says, let's extend this security umbrella to Ukraine as well. No membership, only the security. And this would not happen immediately. It would be part of a peace deal. Now, we know that Ukraine is asking for security guarantees, so Meloni basically wants NATO to give it, which raises two questions. Number one, what's in it for her? And number two, how are different camps reacting to this? Well, we haven't heard any reactions yet. Chances are Western Europe will support the idea. The likes of France and the UK have already offered to send peacekeepers, so they might agree. But the United States? Highly unlikely. Donald Trump is opposed to NATO membership for Ukraine. He has also ruled out American guarantees.
What concessions would you like to see?
Oh, I don't want to tell right now, but I can tell you that NATO you can forget about. I think that's probably the reason the whole thing started.
Which brings us to the other question. Why is Giorgia Meloni proposing this? What's in it for her? To put it simply, it's a safer bet. You see, right now, there's a lot of talk of building a coalition of the willing. Basically, there's no pressure to join. If you want to defend Ukraine, if you're willing, you can pitch in. You can send peacekeepers or give guarantees. The likes of France, Britain, Australia, Ireland, and Canada are open to this, to join this coalition of the willing. But Giorgia Meloni is not. She had rejected the idea of sending peacekeepers. But a NATO umbrella is different because it would automatically include the United States. So Meloni's idea is clear. She wants America to be part of Ukraine's future defense. Maybe she doesn't think that Europe can do it alone. Well, whatever the intent, this proposal does raise questions, not just about Ukraine, but also about NATO's future. Where is this alliance headed? Towards the end of the last decade, the answer was nowhere. It looked like NATO had no future. Only a few years back. In 2019, in fact, French President Emmanuel Macron had called NATO brain dead. But Russia's invasion flipped the switch. Suddenly, NATO found a new purpose. It found a new yet old villain in Russia. Cut to 2025, things are uncertain again. Donald Trump is sending mixed signals on NATO. Yesterday, he gave them a warning. If you don't pay up, I won't defend you.
If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them. No, I'm not going to defend them. I got into a lot of heat when I said that. You said, oh, he's violating NATO. And, you know, the biggest problem I have with NATO, I really, I know the guys very well. They're friends of mine. But if the United States was in trouble and we called them, we said, we got a problem. France, we got a problem. A couple of others I won't mention. Do you think they're going to come and protect us? They're supposed to. I'm not so sure.
So Trump has two issues with NATO. One, that other members don't pay enough, and two, that other members may not come to America's defense. Not that they need it. Despite this rhetoric, Trump is not plotting a walkout, not yet. His buddy Elon Musk wants the US to leave NATO, but Donald Trump has other ideas. He has named a new ambassador to NATO. Listen to what he had to say.
If confirmed, I will work tirelessly to strengthen the alliance, ensure the security of the American people, and uphold our nation's role as the beacon of freedom and liberty. President Trump has been clear. The United States remains committed to NATO and to the principle of peace through strength. That principle has guided NATO's founding and remains vital today as ever.
Trump has a new target for NATO. He wants all members to spend 5% of their GDP on defense. Fun fact, even America doesn't spend 5% of their GDP. The US spends around 3.4% of their GDP on defense. They last spent 5% back in 1990. Either way, Donald Trump's pressure is paying off. Europe is rearming itself. The likes of France want Europe to defend itself, to not be dependent on the United States. But such a pivot could take decades. You need to set up a robust defense industrial base. You need to find money for spending. You need to recruit more soldiers. None of this will happen overnight. So in the short term, NATO will largely remain unchanged. But in the long run, we could be looking at big changes. It could weaken both sides, because the US has also benefited from this alliance. Look at their interventions across the world. American interventions in Libya, in Yugoslavia, in Afghanistan, all of these were NATO operations. Sure, America could have done it all by themselves. But NATO gave them a convenient shield. It gave the impression of support for America's operations. Same with political influence. America's security umbrella gives them deep influence in Europe. If you take that out, will the influence remain? Well, the chances are low. So this is a very significant moment for NATO. The choices made today will decide its future. History has a way of repeating itself, and in the grand theatre of geopolitics, old rivalries do resurface every once in a while. This time, it's not about colonial spoils or naval supremacy. This time, it's about Ukraine and the battle over how to make peace. On one side, you have French President Emmanuel Macron. He is ever the Gaullist, championing a Europe that stands on its own in this battle. On the other side is the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He is sticking to the old script and betting on transatlantic ties. So it looks like it's France versus the United Kingdom once again. They have worked together until now, but leaders, both the leaders in fact, met with US President Donald Trump. Both agree that Ukraine should be defended. Both call for a truce, yet their visions are very different. Take the peace deal, for example. Emmanuel Macron said France and the UK were proposing a 1-month truce in the air, on the seas, and in energy. That's what he said. The UK immediately distanced itself from this. Some officials even dismissed the idea, saying no such agreement was reached. Like I said, competing visions. France wants a deal immediately. The UK wants to hold the line, and the reason is quite simple. Macron is not just thinking about Ukraine. He wants to reshape Europe's security architecture, and it's something that he has openly stated.
Given the threat and whatever happens in Ukraine, we need to increase our defense capabilities, and we need to build, in the next few years, autonomous defense capabilities for Europeans.
Macron's vision stems from a deep-rooted belief that Europe must be able to defend itself. He's even suggested nuclear deterrence, in fact, that France can use its nukes to protect all of Europe. Because nothing screams European unity like France volunteering to press the button for everyone else.
I have decided to open the strategic debate on the protection by our deterrence of our allies on the European continent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the President of the Republic, who is the head of the armed forces.
Of course, the idea sounds grand in a speech, but is it mere posturing? Yes, France's military capabilities are formidable, but they are no match for NATO. Also, will the whole of Europe agree to this? Can Emmanuel Macron get other allies on board? This is one side of the story. Now let's look at Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister. He is the pragmatist in this equation. His approach is rooted in London's long-standing loyalty to Washington. Since the Second World War, the UK has been America's closest ally in Europe. This role has defined its defense and foreign policy. So the UK's first instinct is to keep America in the loop. It's almost like a transatlantic reflex.
We have to make sure the US, Ukraine and Europe are all on the same page to put Ukraine on the strongest possible position. But beyond that, what matters is lasting peace. We've done that by working with the US. No two countries work as closely as we do on defence and security and intelligence.
For Starmer, this is not just about strategy, it is also a necessity. In 2016, Britain exited the European Union. Since then, it has struggled to define its role on the global stage. Being the most reliable European partner to the US is one way to maintain that relevance. It's not like Starmer is dismissive of European autonomy, but his actions suggest something else, that he's placing his bets on the Atlantic Alliance.
The US has been a reliable ally to the UK for many, many decades and continues to be. There are no two countries as closely aligned as our two countries, and our defence, our security and intelligence is intertwined in a way no two other countries are. So it's an important and reliable ally for us. The discussions we've had today, particularly the coalition of the willing, is on the basis that this is a plan that we will work with the US, and that it will have US backing.
So what happens next? Will these competing visions lead to a clash, or can Macron and Starmer make it work? The most likely scenario is that of an uneasy cooperation. The UK and France will continue to work together on Ukraine, but they will have distinct priorities, and this divide goes beyond just these two leaders. It reflects a larger strategic choice that Europe has to make. Should the continent rely on itself for security, or should it remain tied to Washington's shield? And neither position, remember, is without risks. European autonomy requires consensus and capability, both of which remain elusive. Meanwhile, transatlantic dependence leaves Europe exposed, especially to America's many mood swings. Macron and Starmer represent two sides of this argument. The question is, which one will prevail? And speaking of America's mood swings, US stock markets are in turmoil. The reason is Donald Trump and his constant back and forth on tariffs. It is hurting American companies. It is dragging down their stock values and leaving investors rattled. Let's look at America's three main indices and how they have performed this week. Their losses are mounting. The Dow Jones is down nearly 3%, its worst performance since March 2023. The S&P and Nasdaq aren't doing any better. Both dropped over 3% this week, which is their sharpest decline since September 2024. And investors are not mincing their words. They blame Trump's tariffs for this seesaw. They want the White House to clarify what is happening with the tariffs. Will they stay, or will Trump cancel them again? And to be honest, even we are struggling to keep up, but we'll try. Trump has gone back on his word at least twice in the last 48 hours. First, he exempted auto companies from tariffs. Then he rolled back virtually all tariffs on Canada and Mexico. The US president signed special orders yesterday. He expanded the list of goods which are exempted from tariffs. Effectively, almost all the goods that faced higher tariffs have now been exempted. Complete rollback, no extra taxes on them. But here's another twist. The US president insists that this relief is temporary. He has given 1 more month to Mexico and Canada. What made him do it? Was it the sharp reaction from the stock market? Well, this is what Trump said.
You've been influenced, some of these exemptions that have been announced and some of these temporary delays, have you been influenced in those decisions because of the market reaction?
Well, there are no delays at all. No, nothing to do with the market. I'm not even looking at the market because long term, the United States will be very strong with what's happening here. Now, these are countries and companies, foreign companies, that have been ripping us off.
So according to Trump, America will do well in the long run. But what about the short-term pain? Trump says his shock therapy will continue. It is already hurting the US economy. It has triggered a new wave of layoffs. Last month, more than 170,000 Americans lost their jobs. 170,000 people. That's a staggering 245% jump in just a month. Job cuts are now at their highest level since July 2020, and that's when the world was gripped by the pandemic. So Trump has taken the American economy back to that point. Although in this case, experts specifically blame Elon Musk and Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency which he leads. Reports say that their moves, Musk and Doge, their moves to reduce government headcount is driving layoffs elsewhere too. It's being blamed for over a third of all jobs lost. The same report also has this data. It says over 60,000 jobs were cut across 17 agencies of the US government. This could have had a ripple effect on the economy. In fact, let me quote from that report. With the impact of the Department of Government Efficiency or DOGE actions, as well as cancelled government contracts, fear of trade wars and bankruptcies, job cuts soared in February. And this trend apparently is set to continue. So job cuts could soar in the coming months because Trump has given Musk a free hand.
I want them to keep the good people. And so we're going to be watching them, and Elon and the group are going to be watching them. And if they can cut, it's better. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting.
If they don't cut positions, Elon will. Well, that settles the debate. Musk is above Trump's cabinet and all elected officials. If he makes a decision, Trump's ministers must follow. Now, all of this has spooked economists. They say it has increased the risk of recession in America. One report predicts that there is a greater chance of recession now. Another says there's a 40% chance of recession, a 40% risk. Most agree that the US economic growth is heading into negative territory. So if not a recession, a slowdown seems inevitable. And experts are blaming the tariffs for this, followed by a potential drop in consumption. When Trump took office, he promised to bring back the golden age in America. At this rate, he may be turning it into rusted metal. Vantage continues after a short break.
Whilst some of the overnight conditions may not have been as bad as people may have expected, now's not the time to be complacent. And again, I acknowledge everyone has responded to the messaging very well, and I thank them for that. But it's important that now is not the time to be complacent, and to remain in place if you have relocated, or make sure that you don't take activities that you don't need to.
This is not the time to go for a swim or a surf. This is not the time to go for an unnecessary drive. People are encouraged to stay where they are, listen to the advice of emergency services. I know that the drawn-out nature of this event, it's a dynamic weather system, the times change, can lead to people being unsure, heightened anxiety and concern.
The fact that the cyclone it slowed before it crossed the coast, and it didn't cross during this morning's high tide, was particularly good news for that storm surge from the tide. And I have seen an incredible level of preparation. The way that people have responded, the way that they have done the little things around their property, we have seen people heed the advice about stocking up supplies. I really do have every confidence that whatever the rainfall challenges come upon us, that Queenslanders will be able to handle that across a really big section of the coast, and a heavily populated one at that.
Sorry, guys.
Our next story is about Elon Musk, about the billionaire's allegedly unchecked power in the US government. Well, yesterday, it looked like Trump finally drew the line. Sort of. Trump held a cabinet meeting on Thursday, and he apparently reined in Elon Musk. This is what the president told his cabinet members: "You are in charge of your departments, not Elon Musk." Now, this shouldn't really be news. After all, that's how normal governments work. Each minister is in charge of their department. That's how it should be. But Trump had to spell it out, and it must have come as a relief for the American cabinet because, as you know, Elon Musk is in charge of a new body called DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. Officially, it's called a temporary organization, but it has already made a lot of permanent moves. Musk has ordered DOGE to find waste in the form of government contracts and allegedly unnecessary government employees. DOGE has ordered the firing of thousands of people in the US, even people it shouldn't have fired, like people who maintained nuclear weapons and people working to prevent bird flu. They were sacked, apparently as ordered by DOGE. Musk also sent a now infamous email asking government employees to list out 5 things they did, and he said that a failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. So it certainly looks like Musk and his team were in charge of layoffs, and he was taking a chainsaw to the US government.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
Well, we were treated to that delightful performance 2 weeks ago, back when Musk was happy taking credit for all the cuts, both budgetary and job cuts. But now things have changed. Elon Musk has been facing flack for his ham-fisted approach and all the mistakes that DOGE has made. So it seems Trump is trying to distance Musk from the job cuts. He put out this social media post yesterday. Look at the wording. I'm quoting here. Now that we have my cabinet in place, I have instructed the secretaries and leadership to work with DOGE on cost-cutting measures and staffing. We say the scalpel rather than the hatchet. The combination of them, Elon, DOGE, and other great people, will be able to do things at a historic level. You see that? No more hatchet. Or chainsaw for that matter, it's a scalpel. And it's no longer just Elon Musk, but the cabinet secretaries and quote-unquote other great people as well. It is quite the U-turn. So here's what is said to have happened in yesterday's cabinet meeting. Trump said that Musk could make recommendations, but he could not make unilateral decisions on staffing. And Musk was in the room when this happened. Apparently, he said he was on board, and he acknowledged that he had made mistakes. Now, on the surface, this sounds like Musk is being reprimanded. And it sounds like something the cabinet has been asking for. There's been a growing backlash within the US government, with people like FBI Chief Kash Patel telling his agency to ignore DOGE. So Trump's clarification seems to be exactly what the cabinet wanted. But that's only half the story, because here's what Trump said after the meeting.
So I had a meeting, and I said, I want the cabinet members go first, keep all the people you want, everybody that you need. And it would be better if they were there for 2 years instead of 2 weeks, because in 2 years they'll know the people better. But I want them to do the best job they can. When we have good people, that's precious, that's very important, and we want them to keep the good people. And so we're going to be watching them, and Elon and the group are going to be watching them. And if they can cut, it's better. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting.
Trump said he asked the cabinet members to go first. But Elon and the group are going to be watching them. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting. What does that sound like to you? To me, it sounds like Musk has just become their boss, or at least their layoff auditor. Again, this is an unelected billionaire put in charge of overseeing US cabinet members, and apparently he's been given the power to overrule the cabinet. To me, this sounds like Elon Musk is still the one really in charge, but US cabinet members have now become sacrificial pawns, cannon fodder for the inevitable criticism. It looks like a way to shield Musk and let him continue what he's doing. Let's see if the American people buy this charade. Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri is on a 2-day visit to Russia. This visit comes at a pivotal moment. Global efforts are underway to end the war in Ukraine. Diplomacy is picking pace behind the scenes, and amid all of this, India is preparing to host Russian President Vladimir Putin for an annual summit. So these talks are aimed at shaping the next chapter of India-Russia relations. But that's not all. India is one of the few countries that's maintained a strong relationship with Russia. At the same time, India is also engaged with Ukraine. So the question is, can India leverage this position? Can it play a bigger role in the peace talks? Our next report tells you.
India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri is in Russia for a 2-day visit. His trip is part of the annual Foreign Office consultations, a key meeting to review India-Russia relations and lay the groundwork for upcoming high-level talks, including the much-anticipated India-Russia annual summit later this year, where Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to visit India. At the top of the agenda is energy relations, with Western sanctions tightening since the Ukraine war. Also on the table is connectivity and cooperation in the Arctic. Defence ties are also part of the agenda. After all, Moscow has been India's most crucial defence partner for decades. The talks will also discuss alternative payment mechanisms, possibly the rupee-ruble trade or digital transactions. This visit comes at a crucial juncture, with multiple global diplomatic talks underway to find a way out of the Ukraine war. The United States has been in discussions with Russia. Simultaneously, talks with Ukraine are expected to restart. And across Europe, the push for a ceasefire is gaining momentum. Behind closed doors, major powers are navigating a complex diplomatic landscape, And India, a nation that has maintained relationships with both Moscow and Kyiv, finds itself in a unique position. A position of balance, influence and mediation. For months, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has emphasized a consistent stance, a stance rooted in dialogue over conflict, a belief that warfare can never lead to lasting solutions. His message has been clear. Peace can only be achieved through negotiations, something Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar reiterated in a recent statement.
We have been one of the few countries who have been regularly talking to both Moscow and Kyiv. At various levels, my Prime Minister has been talking to President Putin and to President Zelensky. Our view has been that they need to do direct negotiations. That's been our consistent position. We have never advised them what should be the format and what should be the terms of the negotiations. That is their business.
But India's role in this conflict goes beyond diplomatic messages. Its energy partnership with Russia has drawn global attention, especially India's purchase of discounted Russian crude and its strategic defense relationship with Moscow. Yet, India continues to strengthen ties with the West, balancing relations with the United States, Europe and other global powers, walking a diplomatic tightrope that few countries can navigate successfully. Looking ahead, the world will be watching India's next moves closely, with the India-Russia annual summit around the corner and President Vladimir Putin's visit to India on the horizon. Questions remain. Will India play a larger diplomatic role in the Ukraine-Russia peace talks? Currently, New Delhi is navigating geopolitical challenges with a clear message: dialogue over war, diplomacy over conflict, stability over chaos. And in the days to come, that message will be put to the test, with the stakes higher than ever.
Today was a big day for Jammu and Kashmir. You wouldn't know that if you follow only Western media. They only like the gloomy headlines from J&K, like when there is a terror attack or a dubious human rights report, or when Pakistan or Turkey decide to meddle. This time the news is good, so naturally there is silence. Jammu and Kashmir got their first budget in 6 years today. Now every Indian state has a budget, but this is Jammu and Kashmir. Their statehood was revoked in 2019. After that, J&K was ruled directly by the centre. More than 5 years later, things are returning to normal. We had elections towards the end of last year, and now we have a budget. We'll get to the big announcements later, but first, let's look at the past 5 years. How has Jammu and Kashmir fared since 2019? The answer can be found in their economic survey. It was tabled before the budget. Let's go through some key points. The economy grew by 4.89%. That's the compound rate from 2019 to 2025. Think of it as an average. And this is slightly higher than previous periods. From 2011 to 2019, the rate was 4.81%. So the economy grew fractionally faster. In fact, Jammu and Kashmir did better than Delhi, Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. Their per capita income has also gone up by almost 148% in the last 10 years. Right now it stands at 1,54,000 rupees, which is lower than the national average, but the gap is shrinking. On joblessness, there is more good news. Unemployment was 6.7% in 2019. Now it has fallen to 6.1%. Now we come to specific sectors. The primary sector makes up 20% of the output. We're talking about things like agriculture and forestry. The manufacturing sector makes up 18% and the services sector almost 62%. But the labor distribution is problematic. Almost 43% of the people work in agriculture, yet it makes up just 20% of the output. Although this is not a problem that is unique to J&K, it's a problem across India. Now we come to the projections. We are nearing the end of this financial year. Jammu and Kashmir hopes to end it, and listen to this, Jammu and Kashmir hopes to end this financial year with a growth rate of 7.06%, which is again very impressive because India's projected growth rate for the same period is 6.4%. And that sums up the economic survey. Certainly some good news there, especially on the employment front. Now we come to the budget. Women empowerment is a key part of it. The government is starting free bus rides for women. It is also supporting female entrepreneurs. 40,000 of them will get state funding. Another key announcement is free electricity, 200 units of free power per month. The government is also starting free rations, 10 kilos per person from the 1st of April. Now, both these schemes will be limited to poorer sections of the society. And what about investments, especially for the long-term development of Jammu and Kashmir? The government is clearly focusing on agriculture and tourism. Both of these are cash cows for the region. 815 crore rupees has been set aside for agriculture, 390 crore rupees for tourism. And that last allocation is very important because Jammu and Kashmir has immense potential when it comes to tourism. But it needs investment. It also needs targeted assistance, and I'll explain what I mean when I say that. Since 2019, Jammu has attracted more tourists than Kashmir. Kashmir's footfall was 80% less every year, which is something to address. At the same time, foreign tourism is booming. It's almost 300% up in the last 4 years. So overall, the tourism sector is in good health. It is primed for an even bigger leap. And this is a success story that deserves more attention. A lot of things were said about what happened in 2019, but look at the result. Jammu and Kashmir's economic activity has grown. More people have jobs, more investments are coming in, more foreign tourists are visiting. It is a clear vindication of the government's move. Of course, more needs to be done. The central government has promised to restore statehood for J&K, and that is naturally the next step. Let's see how things unfold in the valley. It's tough to be America's friend these days. Since Donald Trump's return to the White House, old alliances have been shaken. Canada and Mexico are furious because Trump imposed tariffs on them. Europe is terrified because Trump keeps hinting that the US won't help them in the event of a war. And the latest nation to feel the heat is Japan. Yesterday, Donald Trump took a shot at the island nation in the east. He spoke about the US-Japan security partnership. And Trump complained that it was unequal, the partnership was unequal. Tokyo is trying to downplay Trump's statement, but does it mean that Japan is next on the US president's hit list? Our next report has the details.
When Donald Trump returned to the White House, Japan rushed to forge ties with the US president. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba was the second foreign leader to meet Trump. He went to Washington to reaffirm the US-Japan friendship and trade ties. Trump was also informed about Japan's plan to increase its military spending. All this seemed to have worked. Trump seemed quite happy.
Thank you very much. Japan is committed to double its defense spending by 2027 compared to my first term. They've invested a lot of money, and I'm pleased to say that this week my administration approved nearly $1 billion in foreign military sales to Tokyo. The United States is totally committed to the security of Japan. We will extend the full strength of American deterrence capabilities in defense of our friend and ally.
This was probably just what Ishiba wanted to hear. But sadly for Japan, yesterday Trump seems to have had a change of heart.
You know, with Japan we have a deal, which is a very interesting one. And I love Japan. We have a great relationship with Japan, but we have an interesting deal with Japan that we have to protect them, but they don't have to protect us. Do you know that? That's the way the deal reads. We have to protect Japan. And by the way, they make a fortune with us economically. There's another case. But we have to protect Japan, but under no circumstances do they have to protect us. I actually ask, who makes these deals?
Trump may have said he loves Japan, but Tokyo was obviously worried about his statement. Top Japanese officials rushed to issue clarifications. Japan's chief cabinet secretary said, Article 5 of the Japan-US Security Treaty stipulates that Japan and the US will respond jointly to armed attacks on Japan. Article 6 allows the US to use Japanese facilities to contribute to Japan's security and to maintain international peace and security in the Far East. He's basically saying that Japan isn't being protected for free. The Security Pact allows the US to have military bases in Japan and troops. About 60,000 American soldiers are stationed in Japan, mostly in the Japanese islands of Okinawa, which are close to Taiwan. This allows the US to be within easy striking distance of China. It gives Washington a massive strategic advantage. And what's more, Japan is subsidizing this advantage. Last year, Tokyo paid $2.9 billion to maintain the US troop presence. In the past, it was suggested that it was cheaper for the US to keep the troops in Japan than to bring them home. This topic had come up during Trump's first term, because he had complained about the Security Pact back then as well. It's clear that Trump still isn't over the issue. And yesterday's comments suggest that he could weaponize it to demand trade concessions from Japan. You heard him say that Japan makes a fortune off the US, so he might bring it up when Japan's trade minister visits Washington. Trump has upended traditional US partnerships since his return to office. He has imposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico, then paused some. He has threatened to walk away from Europe if they don't increase their defense spending. And now it seems that Japan is in for the same treatment as well.
Vantage continues after a short break.
Whilst some of the overnight conditions may not have been as bad as people may have expected, now's not the time to be complacent. And again, I acknowledge everyone has responded to the messaging very well, and I thank them for that. But it's important that now is not the time to be complacent and to remain in place if you have relocated, or make sure that you don't take activities that you don't need to.
This is not the time to go for a swim or a surf. This is not the time to go for an unnecessary drive. People are encouraged to stay where they are, listen to the advice of emergency services. I know that the drawn-out nature of this event, it's a dynamic weather system, the times change, can lead to people being unsure, heightened anxiety and concern.
The fact that the cyclone it slowed before it crossed the coast, and it didn't cross during this morning's high tide, was particularly good news for that storm surge from the tide. And I have seen an incredible level of preparation. The way that people have responded, the way that they have done the little things around their property, we have seen people heed the advice about stocking up supplies. I really do have every confidence that whatever the rainfall challenges come upon us, that Queenslanders will be able to handle that across a really big section of the coast, and a heavily populated one at that.
the final days of Justin Trudeau's premiership. His party will elect its new leader on Sunday. After that, it's just a matter of time. Trudeau could be out by early next week. And he seems quite emotional about it. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Canada addressed a press conference. His eyes were red, his voice was heavy, all clear signs of a breakdown. But Canadians are not buying it. After all, Trudeau's been Prime Minister since 2015. If he isn't leaving Canada in a good shape, he's got no one else to blame. Take a look.
I've made sure that every single day in this office, I put Canadians first, that I have people's backs.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Hundreds flock to Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque for the first Friday prayers of Ramadan. Debris lights up the skies after a SpaceX Starship rocket blast. And a Florida man took breakfast at Tiffany's literally after he swallowed over $700,000 worth of jewelry and tried to escape. Finally, we're taking you back in history on this day. In 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman delivered a landmark speech in Dhaka. It came after Pakistan's military rulers refused to transfer power to his party. In his speech, Sheikh Mujib called for civil disobedience. It is widely seen as the first public declaration of Bangladesh's independence. The new state was created on December 16th after the Liberation War. We are leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in on the international front, and it's tariff whiplash with Donald Trump. After announcing and then pausing tariffs, Donald Trump has now, just a short while back, said that the United States has been ripped off by all countries, by Canada, Mexico and India. Trump has even said India wants to finally cut tariffs as it stands exposed on the global stage. As the pitch